Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy that you all can join us today to celebrate Choices, which is a very exciting anthology that just launched. We have the editor here today. We have some of the incredible authors from the anthology here today. So before we kind of get into the fun stuff, I just want to give first a quick content warning. So some of the stories that we're going to be discussing today are, well, they're on the horror side, as the title suggests. They also can contain things that are graphic, something that might be disturbing, and it also covers some topics that might be a little bit difficult for some people. So really just, take time for yourself and make sure that you are supported in the way that you need to be if some of this stuff becomes a little bit difficult for you. Another thing that I want to do at the very beginning is, in lieu of a land acknowledgement, I just want to encourage everyone to actually look into your communities and see if there's a way that you can support, let's say, Indigenous run organizations or companies or businesses. So for instance, if you're ever in Ontario or, well, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and have the opportunity to go to a little place called Bean Again Cafe. It's a really great art space and, well, as again, the name suggests, a cafe. So I encourage you all to kind of look around in your own communities and see where you can kind of show your support monetarily. So with that said, we have our content warning, we have our little message at the beginning. We'll get into kind of talking about Choices specifically. So Choices, which is an anthology of reproductive horror. It's going over a lot of themes that have to do with choices. Well, again, as the name suggests, seems to be my motto today. Control, bodily autonomy, and it's all kind of looked at through the lens of the horror genre. As I mentioned, we are joined by today's editor. We are joined by some of the contributing authors. We're going to have the opportunity to ask them questions, kind of get a look into how they approached some of these stories, what they feel was important to highlight, and other things we will see as we get there. I will also take this opportunity to say we do have a section for audience questions after we've done sort of, well, my questions. So if you have questions at any time while we're talking, please put them in the chat there so that they are ready by the time we get to our audience question section. Also, don't forget to put the author's name to whom you would like to ask this question so that we know, well, who's supposed to be answering them. With that being said, I would like to give the editor and the authors a chance to introduce themselves because I think they do a better job at it than I would. So for the introduction section, we are going to start with a quick introduction from Diana Gunn, who is the editor of this anthology. So Diana, would you share us an introduction, please?
Yeah, hello, I am Diana Gunn. I started out as a fantasy writer, and all of my fantasy does have quite a strong through line of horror influences and elements, and I really enjoy writing body horror. And for the past year and a half, I've just kind of gone all in on horror. So I am also known for the Killer Debt collection, which is a collection of murder stories, flash fiction that I wrote for real people. They are fictional murders, but real people. Um, and I had the idea for Choices a long time ago, but things take a long time to come to fruition in the publishing world. So I'm just really happy it happened finally, and this is my first multi-author anthology, which makes it really cool. And yeah, I'm just really enjoying my foray into horror. I love it here, and I plan to continue doing some very horrifying story things for the next year or two.
Excellent. Thank you so much. With that, I will then turn to A.H. Davidson, an author from our anthology, for a brief introduction and maybe a quick summary of their story as well, please.
Hi, I am A.H. Davison. I predominantly write science fiction. I sort of stumbled into horror and reproductive horror, but it's a place I find myself very comfortable because I've always had tocophobia, fear of pregnancy, and didn't have a name for that until last year, but I've always had that. Um, and so I have a lot of fun in this space, but I don't, I hope that this is the grossest thing I ask my family and friends to buy. Um, Summary of my story, it focuses on personal autonomy and ownership over one's body. A woman wakes up one day to find that she is no longer the owner of her uterus. Her husband owns her uterus. And the story captures her fears and frustrations and her methods of dealing with that. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you don't identify with it.
Thank you for that. The next person we are going to turn to for a brief intro and summary of their story is Mia Dahlia.
Okay. Hi everybody. My name is Mia. I write dark speculative fiction. It encompasses more than horror, but I think I'm mostly known for my horror writing. And I think there is a very good chance this broken world is one of the best things I've ever written. I do take a very perverse pleasure in knowing that it affects people to tears or anything of a kind. And I think this story is probably strong fiction, my own and other people's. Um, so this broken world is set in a world that's very broken indeed. It limits people's freedoms. It limits people's choices. It dictates them what they can and cannot do with their body.
So it looks like we may have lost Mia for just a moment. So we will do our best to get them back. In the meantime, I am going to ask Elise Scott to provide us an intro and a summary, please.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm Elise Scott, and I write kind of all over the map. I write cozy murder mysteries. I write dark speculative. I have a story featuring an AI that inhabits a plant in an old lady's garden, a nanobot AI in a plant. I write young adult, I write flash fiction, I write poetry. I am everywhere. I can't seem to stay still. But I love writing, so that's happy. And my story, Flickers, is a surreal gothic horror story that explores bodily autonomy by looking through the eyes of a very young woman who has all these memories of having a stillbirth or childbirth experience, but then keeps being told that that didn't happen. So she experiences this medical gaslighting, and then there's all these elements to the story that hopefully create this sort of surrealist confusion energy that the character herself is going through. And then she undergoes a transformation across the span of the story as she discovers what's happening to her. So hopefully it sparks something for people.
Thank you. So we are going to move from Elise to Soyam Siddha.
Hi, I am Swayam Siddha, and I write primarily like Elise. I write science fiction, and I also write fantasy, but I have also written some horror. I am also like a software engineer, and I grew up in India, and I'm a first generation immigrant. My first foray into writing was when I was 10 or 11. I used to write Sherlock Holmes fan fiction. And then my second foray into writing was about when I was 23, and I have not stopped since. I and four of my writer friends decided to create a writing group to critique each other's work, and it has been 10 years, and we have been still going strong. So currently, I'm writing a climate fiction fantasy novel. So that's about me. About my story, The Blood Mango Tree. So, my protagonist is a pregnant young woman who goes to visit her grandmother in her ancestral village in rural India. And it's like they have a very old house, and it has a very old mango tree. So, everybody asks her not to look at the tree, as it is like alleged that the tree turns your unborn fetus into a girl. So girls are not valuable in uh, Indian culture. So like they are kind of looked down upon and mostly perceived as a like a financial burden to their families. So and this tree, as a child, she has heard this many stories about this tree, that this tree is deadly to men and kills boys and turns fetuses into girls. So she knows all the stories, but she is like drawn to the tree, and the tree has this like very red blood colored fruit, and she's all she wants is to like eat that fruit, like as a it's a like a pregnancy craving she's having. And then she discovers that this her extended family has this long history of like killing newborn girls and burying them under this tree. And then later, when sex determination technology comes to India, they just abort the fetus and bury like the fetus under the tree. So the tree has seen a lot of blood and a lot of death of girls. So now it's like a entity, and it wants revenge. So it's like killing men, killing boys, and turning fetuses into girls. So, and she all like my protagonist Duita also discovers, much to her horror, that her mom was like very narrowly escaped aborting Duita when she was pregnant with her. So, and that kind of deeply troubles her. And then she learns that her husband, who is this like very educated, very modern man, settled in a modern Western country, and he expresses his preference to have a male child. So that kind of breaks something in her, and she just goes and eats a mango, like she's just ready to have a girl. So that's my story.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So next on our intro summary list is going to be Sam Rosewild.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Sam Rosewild, and I am an author of fantasy fiction, although it tends to err on the darker side of things. My love of writing started when I was a little one, and I wrote a Judy B. Jones fan fiction, and it really sparked my love of writing, and I've kind of kept going ever since. When I'm not writing, you can find me perusing estate sales for treasures, which is a little morbid, but also like super fun. And sewing. I love sewing, and I love sewing for my local Renaissance festival. And my most favorite thing to do is hanging out with my partner and our two dogs, Momo and Appa. They're my little babies. So, my story in this anthology is called Skin Deep, and it's actually my first published story. So I'm so excited about that. But it is quite a short story, so I don't want to spoil too much. But in a nutshell, it's the story of a Selkie on the day she takes her revenge. And so, yeah, it is pretty short. So I won't go too much beyond that. But if you're looking for something like a satisfying read to like escape the existential dread of living in this world right now, it might be something you enjoy. So, yeah, that's my story.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So before we finish up our intro summary section, we are going to revisit Mia's summary, and we're going to have Diana give a quick summary of Mia's story. Please and thank you.
All right. So, this broken world is about a couple who are experiencing sort of the downfall of reproductive freedoms and also a lot of freedom generally, watching fascism really take hold and all of these rights being restricted. Um, and it is also very much a story. One of the members of the couple is a trans man and has to deal with assault and unwanted repercussions of that in a world where there's no access to healthcare for these things. And it is an absolutely incredible story and just phenomenal prose, phenomenal building of the relationship between the two characters. And it has the honor of being the only story submitted that actually made me cry. So, yeah, This Broken World, incredible story.
Amazing. Thank you. And well, thank you for everyone for introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit about your stories. So as mentioned in the beginning, now is time to do a bit of a guided Q&A. So we're going to be focusing on one author at a time, well, one editor or author at a time. And we're going to be asking some questions that are a little bit specific to them. Again, if you do have questions that I didn't ask, but you still want an answer to, please type those out in the chat as we go so that once we're done this section, I can share those questions with the authors and hopefully get you the answers your curiosity is looking for. So with that, the first person that I am going to question in a, well, less serious way than that sentence made it sound, is Diana. So I'm going to start with, I think, a question that I personally would also like the answer to is just how did the idea for this specific anthology come to you?
Over the years, I've seen a lot of anthologies that were just incredible responses to really messed up moments in our time and really terrible things happening in the world, ranging from Nothing Without Us, which is another Renaissance anthology that is less, directly related to one specific incident, but more as sort of a response to ableism and exclusion of disabled people, to Your Body Is Not Your Body, which was a charity anthology raising money for, I forget off the top of my head which charity supporting trans folks, but it is just an incredible collection of trans body horror stories. And um, I really wanted to do something like that, and the moment that felt right to me, the thing that felt like the thing that where I could contribute the most based on just my own history, skill set, and interests was uh reproductive rights and all of the scary things going on with those throughout the West.
Thank you. So the next question, I think, kind of is along those same lines, but maybe going for a little bit more specificity. Was there any one particular event, sort of in social history, in political history, that made you feel like this book needed to happen when it did?
Yeah, I mean, I may be Canadian, but we feel things that happen in the US very deeply. They reverberate, and also just, because I'm in publishing and it is like such a um for better and worse, it is such a US centric industry. I have a lot of friends in the States, so when Roe v. Wade was overturned, it solidified from oh, I think this would like be kind of interesting to do, like something that had kind of lived in my head for a little bit, to something that I really, really like needed to make happen.
So my next question is, when you sort of had the idea for the anthology and thought, okay, now I'm going to go get stories to fill said anthology, how did you choose which ones? Did you have something sort of in mind for what you were looking for?
Um, I will be honest and say a lot of it was vibes. Um, but I did know that I wanted to make sure that I had a good mix. I wanted to make sure that I had, you know, a mix of stories that are more tragic and more vengeful, and, you know, a couple of stories that are more about resistance and hope sprinkled in there, so that it wasn't all just like a complete downer while also still looking unflinchingly at the reality. Um, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just representing like the threats that, you know, more privileged, like, you know, urbanite, upper working class or lower middle class white people are facing, or just cis women, because the reality is that these things deeply impact trans folks too. So I wanted to have a good mix of identities and types of stories, and I also wanted to like I wanted to make sure that each story really stood out on its own, and I have made the joke that I might be the only anthology editor ever who's had to ask the question, how many stories about someone removing their own uterus is too many? Um, because yeah, there it was definitely a there I got so many stories, and one of the things was, while they were all still very different in the end, because every writer brings their own perspective and voice to a story, there were certain things where the beats were similar enough that if I'd had, you know, 3 or 5 of those types of stories, it might have started to feel more monotonous. And I really wanted to avoid that and to make sure that each story was a fresh, new experience.
So we have a quick question from the author chat here. How many stories of people removing their uterus did you have to choose from?
I think there were probably 6 or 7 in total that were submitted. I will say there were 4 that were seriously considered.
Excellent. So my next question, I do think you kind of answered some of it. I'm gonna switch up just a little bit. But I did hear that when you put out the call for stories in 2024, you ended up with 150, or well, over 150 responses. So that to me says that this is definitely a topic that's resonating with a lot of people. When you were deciding which submissions made it into the anthology, did you consider how, let's say, putting this story in one specific part of the anthology made the anthology stronger as a whole? So, kind of, did you see them almost as puzzle pieces that you're trying to fit together into the whole?
Not really. I didn't think about the order for the anthology pretty much until the end, except for one story, which is the very last story, Watcher of the Wisps. I knew immediately that I needed that story and I needed it to be at the end. But otherwise, everything, the order was all decided after I'd chosen all the stories and as I was looking at them as a whole.
Thank you. So that was my final question for you today. Before I move on to our author, Mia, did you have anything else that you wanted to share?
Really, I just wanted to thank these incredible authors for sharing these stories. I was so honored that people trusted me with these stories that were so deep, and this is such a personal topic, and um I really felt honored that people would trust me to submit these stories to me and to have me publish these stories. And I am grateful also for all the people who submitted who didn't get in. Like, there were enough amazing stories that I easily could have made two anthologies. And yeah, there's a lot of incredible skill and talent in the writing community, in the horror community, and I'm so proud to be part of it and to make this contribution.
Well, thank you so much, Diana, for answering all of my questions, for humoring me with that. Again, a reminder to everyone who is watching, if you do have questions for Diana, please pop those into the chat while we're going through our other Q&As, and I will just make sure those questions get asked and hopefully get answered. Excellent. So we are going to move now to Mia. I have some questions for you. Starting with just, I'd say, a lighter toned question. What is one thing that you think readers might be surprised to know about you?
I was thinking about it, and I guess I'm not all doom and gloom. I think that should be said. I know there is a lot of preconceptions about horror writers, and I feel like I break the mold in considerable ways. For one thing, this is my only black T-shirt, and I have no tattoos. Um, for another, I play the ukulele and dance every chance I get. But more importantly, in terms of this conversation, I don't just write horror. I have published a science fiction novella named Erica. I've published a neo-noir dark comedy with baked goods and murder called Do You Know the Muffin Man? Both of those available are from Spaceboys books. And I've written a bunch of short stories that are not horrific. I'd like to think that my fiction can please any reader, at least some aspect of it. I write mysteries and noir. One of the first stories I've published, and my first story published in Canada was in the mystery magazine. It was a noir story, and I was shortlisted for Crime Writers Association Dagger Awards last year for my noir story. So yeah, if somebody wants to try my work and thinks it's going to be too dark, I promise there is something there that won't be. And even my horror has never been particularly grotesque. It's psychological more than anything. I know people have read it, and they were, I think, from about 16 to the oldest I've heard of was 82 from readers. So I think it covers a comfortable span. And yeah, that's a long-winded answer to that question.
Thank you. I personally am a fan of using stories about baked goods in, well, a different way, sort of like Pushing Daisies had that kind of dark
Yes.
baked goods aspect to it. So I'd be really interested in reading your story. So my next question is, and I know we kind of talked just now about how you do other things besides horror, but I'm gonna ask a question about horror. It is, do you remember the first horror story that you ever either read or wrote or just engaged with in a meaningful way?
I remember both because I find stories in general, good stories anyway, pretty unforgettable. I think the first stories I ever read that I would consider horror were probably Grimm's fairy tales, because to this day I will passionately argue that read in their original version, they are horror, and they do the same thing to a child's mind that horror, good horror, does to an adult mind. But the first story I ever wrote, I guess it was my debut novel, Estate Sale. It's a novel full of short stories. So, there is a general narrative and there are short stories about each object from the estate sale interwoven into the general narrative. And that was probably the first. I haven't been writing all that long in the grand scheme of things. I only started 4 summers ago, and it just sort of came to me. This story just started haunting my brain, and I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive wife who told me to start writing it down, as opposed to most people who would probably react differently to somebody saying, I have stories in my head. So I started writing it down, and it ended up this novel. And yes, of course, it's unforgettable. It's my first. I love it madly. This winter, I revisited it and re-edited it and expanded it by about 10%. And I found a new publisher for it, Lethe Press. So it's been reissued this past summer, and I'm thrilled with the new version. And I hope more people get to discover it. My first.
Amazing. Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question that's more specific to the story included in Choices. Well, not just more specific, but entirely specific to the story included in Choices. So this broken world, there's a lot of vivid kind of atmosphere, vivid scenery and that sort of thing going on. What was the part that came first for you when kind of conceptualizing this story? Was it the world, the characters? Was it the kind of central conflict, the story beats, that sort of thing? So what was born first?
It's difficult to say. I don't know. The way my brain works when it comes to short fiction is I usually browse through open calls. Unless I have stories that just pop up into my head, I would browse through open calls and I see if anything catches my eye. And of course, Diana's call, Renaissance Press call, did. I was very intrigued by it, and it kind of sat in my head. But I don't start writing ever until I have a first sentence. That's what I need to have first. Once I have a first sentence or a first scene, I will sit down and write a story on just about anything. But that's the crucial element. And I draw a lot of what I write, as I'm sure everybody does, from our surroundings, from what I see. And the opening scene of this broken world, that actually happened. That was me and my wife sitting at an outdoor concert that our county always throws all summer long. We have this concert every worried she wasn't warm enough, and I reached over to offer her a sweater. And that's when I knew I had these people, and I put them in the context of that story. And it stands to mention that the story was written in September of 2024. I think that timing is crucial, especially if you live in America. And there was a lot of talk of politics. I'm not the kind of author who will discuss politics in public, but I will write stories, things that I think of slip in, and the environment does permeate the fictional world. And I was thinking a lot about all sorts of things I wish I didn't have to think about. And that's how the story got born.
Thank you. So my final question for you is another question about sort of horror as a genre. It's just, do you think horror is more powerful when it's rooted in either realism or the surreal, or a third option I didn't mention?
No, it's one of the two options. It's definitely the realism for me. My monsters are almost always people. In fact, I've recently been rejected by a publisher who absolutely loved the novella I submitted, but was so disappointed that in the end it turned out to be a person responsible for what was happening and not a monster. And I said, well, yes, that happens, but that's a lot of my work. I think I studied social psychology and I find it absolutely fascinating. I think it's so much more impactful. And so it packs such a harder punch, the things people can and have and will do to each other, rather than monsters. I think monsters work when they're almost like a metaphor for people, but as just supernatural monsters, that's not that interesting. It's more of a jump scare effect as opposed to the kind of thing you can really do when you explore psychology. I think it's still horror. Horror is an amazing genre because horror accommodates so many things and it speaks to the truth of human nature better than almost anything else out there. But I think it should be based in realism. Every event I go to, every event I've done as an author, somebody always asks me, what's your favorite horror book? And I always say 1984. And they always say, what? That's not horror. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Read the book. Go and read the book. Tell me that's not horror. I don't know. Even if you like creature things or body horror, read the rat scene. You will be terrified. It is a terrifying book. So realism all the way.
Amazing. Thank you. So that was my final question that I have written down here. But as I did with Diana, I'm going to ask you as a final question here. Was there anything that you felt you wanted to share with everyone listening?
I just wanted to say thank you so much to Renaissance Press, to Diana for selecting my story, for getting it out there, for putting me in the company of these amazing authors. I'm proud and I'm honored to be a part of this project, and I hope people get a chance to check it out because I truly believe in it, and I think it's amazing and timely and really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we are going to move to our next author here, who is going to be Elise. So, Elise, I have my first question for you, which again, it's going to be about horror. What is it that first drew you to writing horror, and specifically reproductive horror?
So I kind of fell into horror sideways. I write a lot of speculative fiction and I lean dark. I like to put protagonists through the ringer in order to help them discover some kind of empowering truth that they're missing at the start of the story. And I mostly write novels and not short stories. But as my group of critique partners were reading my work, they more and more were like, "This is horror that you're writing. Yes, it's speculative fiction, but also it's horror." So then I was like, maybe I should read more deeply in the genre and like learn more about what people are calling horror because um, as we just heard, there are books that we don't tend to think of as horror, but they absolutely can be seen through that lens. So that idea got me started in considering the elements of my stories that were already horror and then leaning more deeply into that. And as a person who has survived a lot of different kinds of trauma and now I'm a solo parent, identify as non-binary, so there's a lot of like complexities to my own identity, and then living through the Roe v. Wade decision and being the solo parent of a young girl and worrying about the world that she is growing up in. All of that kind of came together for me to make me just really need to explore some of these themes more deeply.
Thank you. So my next question is, so how did you become involved with the Choices Anthology?
So I have one of my critique partners, a friend of mine, who just actually sent me the call. She saw the call for submissions. And I had been talking about this project that I was working on, this idea that I had. And she messaged me and she was like, I have the perfect home for that story that you've been talking about. So I was like, okay, cool. And I went and looked, and I fell in love with the whole idea of the project. It had never occurred to me that there could be an anthology that is so honed in on a topic that was so relevant to me right then. So I was really excited to see that, and that really motivated me to get it super polished and in.
Excellent. Thank you. So my next question is going to be about your story. So your story, Flickers, it deals with some deeply personal and somewhat unsettling themes. So how did you kind of approach writing about such sensitive topics?
So without going too deep into personal disclosure, there are numerous pieces of that I've lived through myself. I have experienced childbirth loss. I've experienced medical gaslighting. I've experienced emotional, psychological, and physical abuse. So like living through those pieces gave me a lot of the sort of like deep, visceral, emotional landscape piece of what I wanted to do with this character. And then it was just a question of reframing that into the gothic surreal setting, and then leaning away from realism and towards getting as unhinged as I could within my story, so that I could explore the themes that I wanted to explore as honestly as possible.
Thank you. So my next question is, my second final question, my final official question. So how do you see horror as a way to explore either social and or political issues?
So I think one of the things that's so great about horror is there are a lot of conventions in writing that you're allowed to break in horror. You don't have to follow traditional narrative. You don't have to, characters don't have to adhere to like rigid expectations or arcs. And the breaking of those conventions isn't a breaking with the covenant between writer and reader as it is in some other genres. Like if you fail to follow some of these conventions in other genres, you better have earned it or your story will fail. But in horror, there's so much more freedom because readers are expecting to have their expectations rent to shreds or crushed, right? So I think that like being allowed to kind of go outside of or beyond what we consider like normal, either within writing or within, the experience of world and story, gives us a lot of freedom to not just allegorically, like I know certainly there's a lot of freedom to, use metaphor, violence in literal as violence in metaphor and that sort of thing, but also like just to break story in ways that are engaging and give us some freedom to look at the ways that our world is being broken around us that people might not be looking directly at.
Amazing, thank you. So my final question then is there anything else that you would like to share with everyone listening today?
Well, I feel like I'm going to start to sound repetitive here, but my big thing is just feeling so honored and so grateful to be a part of the project, and also that like getting to read the other stories in this anthology. I was already excited, but then like seeing the other stories made me feel so thrilled and proud to get to be with this group of writers and have my name on the same cover as them, and then meeting people and hearing their thoughts and talking to them. It's been an enormous honor, and so I'm super grateful to Renaissance and to Diana and to everybody for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you. Again, thank you for putting up with my questions and sharing your answers to them. So we are going to move now to asking A.H. Davison some questions. I never know when an author uses letters in the beginning, whether to just say A.H. or use the whole author name, but A.H. Davison. My first question here is going to be, can you tell us a little bit about yourself that maybe you didn't get to in your intro, if you feel like it, and how you specifically started writing horror.
Sure. So, I accidentally stumbled into writing horror. There was an open call for a fungal anthology, I think called Spore. And I wrote my first horror story for that one. And I'm a bad horror writer in that I haven't read the genre a lot. So I really went in blind and I wasn't sure what was too much or what was not enough and what was expected. So I was rejected for that particular anthology. And I'm grateful because I'm really glad that this is my first publication. But I enjoy the when you write, you're trying to make people feel something. You're trying to pass on a feeling that you have through words. And horror is really unique in that you can pass on these really visceral, gross, bodily feelings through words. And I have a lot of those feelings and I enjoy passing those along. So after that, I ended up writing a another sort of reproductive horror adjacent story um, about a woman who wants to be a mother so badly that she fakes her pregnancy and then kidnaps a pregnant woman to try to take her child. I am fascinated, as somebody who does not want to be a mother, I am fascinated by people who want to be a mother so badly that they will do something like that. I'm still trying to sell that story. It's very niche, and there aren't a lot of venues that want to publish that. If you're one of them, please let me know. Um, but I wrote that one for just like a private anthology in my writing group. And after that, people were saying, "Oh, you're now the reproductive horror writer," and they started sending me uh, calls. So that's sort of how I started writing horror was I wrote two and it sort of works. I enjoy doing it and I'm happy to scroll through the open listings and see what people are looking for and write for what calls to me.
Thank you. So my next question was going to be what drew you to take part in this anthology, but I have a pretty good idea of most of the
I
answer to that
Yeah,
one.
my writing group, I got multiple DMs from people saying, "Did you see this call? You need to write for this." I think the call was posted in August. I don't think I found out about it until
Hmm.
September, and I don't think my first story idea came to me until mid-October. And it was way too big. I had to ditch it and start again. I think I wrote the story in about 10 days, and I wrote it with 15 minutes. I submitted it with 15 minutes to spare, so it was a tight one.
So when this particular call, I guess, came across your desk or whatever, desktop screen, um, how did you feel about that? Did you kind of think, okay, this is perfect?
Yeah, it's I could probably write enough stories to fill a whole anthology on this topic by myself. Um, it's a topic that I feel very passionately about. It's a topic that I've spent many nights kept awake by. Um, yeah, it was I had to submit something for this. It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of what. And yeah, I'm really happy that this story was what came about. I usually throw out my first story for writing prompts and things like that. And I felt like everybody was going to submit this story. So it was really great to see the collection and everybody's stories are so personal and so passionately written that I get the feeling that everybody sort of felt that way, that this was the obvious story to submit and everybody must be submitting this story, but I need to write this one and submit it. So,
Thank you. So my next question is going to be, I guess, without giving away too many spoilers, how would you describe Whose Pussy Is This to someone who hasn't read it yet? And I'm going to add a little aspect, and who might not read horror as their first genre.
sure. So, unfortunately, I think this story might be for everybody. Um, if you are concerned about the future of reproductive control and making sure that you always own your entire body and get to make the decisions around this, I think that this story will speak to you. As far as a summary, I think I gave as much detail into the actual story as I can without giving too many things away. But I think Casey Lawrence described the story really well, saying it was one of the most grotesque stories she ever read. It is riveting, horrifying, brutal, but necessary. And I agree with that, that it is brutal, but necessary. I think it's an important read, and I'm really honored and grateful that it's part of this collection.
Thank you. So again, my final official question, it's going to be, your story touches on themes of identity and autonomy. How do you hope readers connect with them?
I hope readers don't connect with that. I hope readers have lived lives where they have felt that their identity and autonomy were not in danger, that they have always had full control over their body and how they live in this world. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people will connect with it. I hope that they feel less alone. I hope that they feel like we're living in a world that is better than the one that my story depicts, and that we can behave and vote and do things in a way that keeps us from ending up in a world like the one that my story takes place in.
So my final question, as I've asked everyone else, is there anything that you wanted to share?
Before I get into the repetitive bit, I am realizing that the thing that I like about horror is the viscerality of it. And I think the thing that sparked that in me was my parents taking me to the Spike and Mike Sick and Twisted animation festivals, probably younger than I should have been. And there was one in particular, the Hangnail. And that one has stuck with me my entire life. And if you aren't familiar with it, go look it up. But I think that was the first one that was just like, oh, okay, there is a way to like show somebody something or tell somebody something that will make them feel it in their body and be haunted by it. And I just want to say that I am so grateful that this is where my debut publication is. And I'm so honored to be among these authors and these stories. Thank you so much to Diana and to Renaissance.
Thank you. So with that, we are going to move on to our next author. And before we do, I'm going to give you just all another quick reminder that if you have questions for these authors that has not been covered, or just there's something you're curious about, really about anything relating to their work, this anthology, the horror genre, please do share those questions in the chat there. Again, specifying who you would like to ask this question to. If you don't specify, I'll decide. But just a reminder to stick those in the chat if you have them. So we are going to move now to Soyam. My first question here is, so you've mentioned that there is this mango tree as kind of a central piece to this story. Was there a reason that you chose a mango tree specifically?
So like when I was growing up in India, India has a rich folklore of like haunted trees, trees inhabited by unworldly like creatures, and trees with poisonous fruit. So I feel like mango has a like a rich cultural connection with India, and I felt like that would be like so like we say that it's the best fruit. So I thought making it a mango tree will make it more irresistible for the protagonist to kind of have the fruit. So that's why I chose the mango tree.
Thank you. So my next question is, do you typically write stories in the horror genre, or was this something a little bit new to you?
This was definitely not new. I have written shorter stories in the past in horror. Like I think this would be my third story in horror genre.
I have my own personal follow-up question, outside of horror, what kind of other genres do you enjoy?
I mostly write science fiction. I think with the advent of AI, I think people are scared who are in writing, but I think AI gives you a lot of avenue to write about. So like it's like wide open. So all the short stories I have written recently are about AI. So I think it gives us a lot of material also. So mostly science fiction and also fantasy. So
Well, those are all genres that I personally enjoy. So, thank
I'm
you.
glad.
So, my next question is going to be, how have your personal experiences or perspectives shaped your approach to horror?
So, personally, I have never had any experiences with any ghosts. So, but I feel like it's same as the question of like being surrealistic or realistic. I think when you see the reality of human nature, there is already so much horror, like so much evil in people around us and people like even within us. So I don't like that is my where I write from, and also I feel like whenever like a unworldly experience happens to you, either like in real life or in like in a book, it is there to teach you something, like to maybe change your perspective or maybe cause some growth. So that's how I approach horror.
Thank you. So the next question is, what is it that you think readers might feel after finishing The Blood Mango Tree?
So what why I wrote this story is like when I was 11 or 10, I read a newspaper article where a woman was forced to abort her female child, and then she was forced to dispose of that fetus by throwing it off a bridge into a river, which was horrifying. And that image stayed with me like till date. And there are like 46 million missing female child in India in the last 40 years. So, which like mostly were eliminated because of the sex like determination technology, which is illegal in illegal in India, but is not enforced very. So the sex ratio in like the northern and western Indian states are like skewed like anything, and that has led to human trafficking. So it's a very dark subject, but what I think my readers might feel after reading is hope. Because even if like your agency is being taken away from you, in my story, the protagonist find a way to take the agency back and give birth to a girl. So that's what I feel like my readers will feel.
Thank you for that. And finally, as I've done in the past, was there anything that you wanted to share with everyone listening?
Just that I'm very, very honored and very thankful for Diana and Rena's Breast for giving me this opportunity. This is my debut publication. And I'm so, after speaking with all the writers on this panel, I'm so honored to be just to be within like their ranks. So a big, big honor. Thank you so much.
And thank you for answering all of my questions. With that, we are going to move now to our next author, and that is going to be Sam. So, for Sam, my first question is, what drew you to writing a story about a Selkie specifically?
Yeah. So I have always loved mythology and folklore and fairy tales. Growing up, I definitely went through like the Greek mythology phase, the Norse mythology phase, the fairy tale phase. And it kind of reminds me of that quote from C.S. Lewis that's like, someday you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again. And I am back in my phases. And so the thing about, folklore that I'm really drawn to are their messages and their warnings. Like our ancestors thought that they were really important to convey to their loved ones and their children and the world around them. And so, like, what does that say about them? And then as their descendants, like, what does that say about us? And so a lot of my writing draws on those traditions. One thing I've learned in telling people that I wrote a story about Selkies is that a lot of people don't know what Selkies are, which surprised me. But just so that we have a general like context and knowledge base, Selkies are a Scottish/Celtic folklore tradition. And the idea behind it is that there are these seals that can like shed their coats. And if you find their coat, the seal is like when their coat is gone, I should say, they become this beautiful woman. And if you can find their coat, they have to be your wife. And but if the Selkie ever finds their coat again, they will return to the sea. So that this when I heard about this anthology, I really chewed. I loved the theme and I really chewed for a long time on what I should write about. I am a chewer. I'm a slow processor and I have to chew on things for a while. And so I remember the moment I realized I needed to write about Selkies. I was driving and I was driving in the mountains. It was sunset. I was like driving through a field. I'm not kidding. I saw a horse in this golden light, and some little voice in the back of my head said, I think this story has to be about a Selkie. And I have no clue where that came from. I hadn't thought about Selkies since I was a child. And when I tell you that I pulled over so fast to write down that idea, I like turned the car around and was like, this is brilliant. And so it just kind of felt like kismet. And honestly, in describing the context of Silkies, it feels like what better than this type of narrative to embody this theme? So yeah, that's why I wrote about them, and I'm so glad that the voice in the back of my head didn't shut up on that day.
Thank you. So my next question is, how does writing in the horror genre allow you to express certain ideas or certain themes that another genre might not?
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a great question that, a lot of people here have touched on today. For me, as I mentioned before, I'm not exactly a horror author. I tend to delve into fantasy, although, like I said, it tends to be a little bit of darker fantasy. But one thing about me is that I have this like strong sense of justice and right and wrong. And for people like me with that like really strong notion, I have like a certain amount of rage in my body at all times. Um, and so I haven't written too much horror, but one something that was just amazing for me is that I could pour all of my rage into the story. It like haunted me. It like possessed me and I put it all into the story and I really enjoyed that. I didn't have to like back away from darker things that maybe like a pure fantasy reader might not want to read. I could just go for it and make it really messed up. Um, and the other thing I love as a person who also loves justice is that horror allows, these people who are bad people to have like a comeuppance that is just really satisfying and like primal. And after this experience of writing the story, I kind of feel like if you don't feel a little feral while like writing and consuming horror, like what's even the point? So those have to be my favorite things about writing in horror now.
Thank you. So my next question, and this is something that I personally was a little bit curious about while reading. Why did you choose to write your story skin deep from the husband's perspective?
Mhm. Yeah, and this is kind of a hard question for me to like answer because it was a really early decision for me. Like I was literally in the field looking at the horse. I said, I have to write out Selkies and also it has to be from the husband's perspective. And so I don't know exactly why. Well, I know like looking back why I made that decision, but it just happened immediately. I knew immediately that it needed to be written like this. But I think part of why it's essential that the story is from the husband's perspective and not the Selkie's perspective are that there are things that I couldn't depict from anyone else's perspective. Like the husband's character is someone that we maybe know or we might know. It might be your uncle, it might be your boss, it might be some random guy in the grocery store. I don't know. But as we're in his head, we slowly realize that, hey, this dude is like a monster. And we might not know that if we weren't in his head. And I also appreciate that it allowed me to like have this like impending sense of dread that just keeps getting more intense as you continue to read it. I have to say, my lovely partner reads all of my stuff before I send it out. Thank you. You were amazing. Um, and I just remember I like handed it off and they came out into my workspace and they were like halfway through and they were like, why are you letting this guy be such a jerk? And I was like, hey, keep reading. So it was really fun to like write from the perspective of someone who kind of grossed me out, to be honest with you.
You. And then the next question I have is a little bit of a fun one. At least I think it's fun. Is there anything else that you are working on at the moment?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. It's like super timely for me right now. I've grown to like writing short stories. I've been challenging myself to do it more. But by nature, I am extremely verbose, and so I'm a novelist at heart. And literally 2 weeks ago, I just started my next novel project, which unsurprisingly is a dark fantasy, and it's rooted in fairy tales, like more so than any of my other work I've done before. And I was kind of like haunted by this idea of like, with these gruesome fairy tales, we have these characters, we see their journeys, and then they're just like, and everything's great. And I'm like, is it great? Like, you guys like fought a witch, like people died, and you don't have any trauma. I don't believe that. So that was kind of what the basis of my next project what is about. And when I was thinking about like, I really wanted to base it on like a fairy tale that everyone kind of knows. And for me, the obvious choice was Hansel and Gretel, because like that is a really messed up fairy tale, and we tell that to children, like wow. And I love it's my favorite though. It's like super dark and weird and really awful. Everyone in the story is awful, and I kind of love that. So my project is set in like a vaguely post-medieval dramatic inspired world. And it's the story of a woman and her sister. And when they were younger, they escaped this like awful, gruesome fairy tale that's just left them really impacted. The main character has a lot of emotional trauma, and the younger sister, it's like taken a physical toll on her body. And so now it's been years after, and they're like eking out a relatively normal existence despite the like wild amount of trauma that they have. But that all changes. It's like the most important day of the main character's life, and she wakes up to the dark forest growing in her home, which is where fairy tales come true. And her sister is missing, and so she kind of has to go back into this like god awful nightmare in order to get her sister back that she loves so much. So I am just really excited about this project. I'm really looking forward to it being like weird and dark while also being like really heartfelt at the same time with like themes of chosen family and like thriving under the worst circumstances. And I just really love the world and characters I've created so far. Like I said, I only started 2 weeks ago, but I'm already like 10,000 words in, which tells me that I'm really vibing with this project. Um, and so, yeah, I'm really excited to just explore this plot I've chewed on for so long. But I also know my characters are like really lively and they're going to take it in ways I don't expect. So, yeah, stay tuned on that one.
Thank you. That does sound like fun, maybe is the right word.
Question
It
mark?
sounds interesting. Definitely something that I personally have an interest in. I quite like the taking a story we all know and then making it stranger. So, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. As as I've been doing, my final question is just, is there anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I feel really honored. Like this anthology is full of works from wildly competent and creative people. And part of me is like, and you want my story in here too. But I'm just thankful to get to work alongside with such amazing authors and to have this kind of message in the world right now is really important. And so, yeah, I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Thank you. So that does conclude the first section where I ask the questions that, well, Samira and I came up with. And we're going to move on to our audience Q&A section. So we have one question in the chat here, and it is for all the authors. We have a couple questions in the author chat as well for all of the authors. So we are going to get to that in just a second, because I have one question that is specific for one author from my own brain. I just wanted to ask, Elise, where did you get those glasses?
I love that. I got them on Amazon for like $15. Yeah. So I have a complicated relationship with glasses because I have a strange eye thing going on. But for stuff like this, I just wear regular readers. So you can like put your prescription in for your readers, and it's great. If you email me, I will send you the link so you don't have to go hunting.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take the question from the chat here, and this is going to be for each author. I will call on you when it's time for your answer specifically. So the question is, do you find that you write from a place of anger or fear or hope or really some other emotion? And which emotion do you find inspires you the most? So I'm going to do my best to do alphabetical order here. So I will ask A.H. Davison first for an answer, please.
It's an interesting one. I don't know that I have a consistent emotion that I write from. For this story in particular, my first idea started out much, much bigger. The working title was Mass Hysteria, and it was the same sort of world where women aren't in control of what they do with their uteri. But I wanted to tell it from sort of every angle. I wanted the rape victim who is carrying a baby she doesn't want, a woman who desperately wants to be a mother and is carrying a non-viable fetus that is going to kill her if she doesn't get the abortion that she's being denied, a woman who's an empty nester, but knows that if one of us is oppressed, we're all oppressed. And so she's joining the fight. And then somebody who is okay with the way that the world's going because it doesn't affect her personally. And she can't quite understand why all of her friends are so upset. And that was too big. And it obviously wasn't centered in one emotion. And I really had to dig into my experience with feeling like I wasn't in control with my birth control methods and what I wanted to do to prevent pregnancy and things like that. And so I think it came from a place of probably fear and frustration and hopelessness. Um, but I wouldn't say that that's where I always write from. I dig into the emotion or the visceral feeling that the story calls for. Great question.
Thank you. So the next person I am going to ask that same question about our emotion behind the stories is Diana.
The short answer to which emotion is yes, all of them. I mean, I do usually write novels, so throughout a novel, you're gonna have a pretty broad spectrum of emotion. Um, and the short stories that I've written have mostly just been I found an anthology call and it looked really cool, and I wanted to make something for it. I will say I definitely write out of anger probably more often than a lot of other things because as I think it was Sam that was saying, when you have the strong sense of justice, you're just kind of constantly vibrating with rage. So I got a lot of anger and I get a lot of it out through story, and that's part of why I've been so deep into horror recently, is just exploring the darkness of humanity and shining a light on it and tearing it down. And yeah, um, yeah, lots of anger. But I am currently actually transitioning back into Fantasyland, um, and that series that I'm about to start, it does have I mean, there's still a considerable amount of anger, but it does have a lot more hope than what I've been writing for the past year, and I'm kind of excited for that change.
Thank you. Next on the list, I have Elise, please.
Okay, so I think a lot about stuff like this, so I'll try to keep my answer concise so I ramble sometimes. But in my mind, fear and anger are kind of tethered to one another because they're the two emotions that protect us, right? That's the fight and the flight. They're the two pieces of our emotional makeup that tell us when we're in danger and we need to take action to keep ourselves safe. And so whenever either of those emotions arises for me, if I can't shake it, it's usually a sign that there's some kind of deeper, like an opportunity for either insight or growth within myself. So most of my best stories have come from a place of feeling an emotion like that and then trying to figure out how to put a character into that same emotion and then push them through it into hope or empowerment or some kind of action-oriented, restoring safety kind of vibe. And by doing that, I work through a lot of my own trauma. So I kind of think my TLDR, my very short response has to be the place where those three meet is where my inspiration usually lives.
Thank you. So next on my list, I'm going to go with Mia, please.
Okay, so I thought about it while everybody else was answering, and I don't know how to narrow it down to a feeling. There are so many feelings when I write. But I would say more than anything, I write from a place of curiosity. I'm very interested in what makes people tick. I'm very interested in how they work, why they do what they do. It just goes back to the interest in psychology. And when I write, it helps me understand people. I put them in different situations, and it helps me understand how they work and why they do what they do. So it's a good way for me to process real life situations, as I've often done, thinly disguised in fiction, and it's a good way for me to process the imaginary scenarios just to see how that would play out. It's just so interesting. And the emotions, they come later and they come throughout and they're always there. I just revisited this broken world before doing this meeting, and yeah, still hits the feels, so good.
Thank you. So the next author I'm going to pose this question to is Sam.
Um, So I think for short stories, for me, I tend to embody one emotion. So the Selkie story, all rage, all the time. I remember I was writing it and my partner walked in and was like, "What do you want for lunch, honey?" And I was like, "Leave me alone." Um, so it goes in the wrong places sometimes. So for me, short stories are usually a one note emotion because they are so short that I just want to pour whatever I have into that story. But as someone who is more of a novelist, that requires me to have a more range of emotions. And I find in my novels, my inspiration is usually actually putting all of my trauma into my characters and then playing them out like they're paper dolls. And so I feel like I'm always like crying while I'm writing because these people are like they're filled with rage at the patriarchy, or they're filled with love for their partner who loves them so much. And so yeah, I find my own trauma and experiences are my biggest emotional wheelhouse for my writing, my longer works at least.
Thank you. So the next author I'm going to ask this question to is Soyam.
So I don't write from a particular emotion. Like I'm a dramatic person, so I see what can cause maximum drama. So I go with that. So whatever is like whatever feel like, okay, if my character, my protagonist goes through this, so this will be very dramatic. So I go to that. But I feel like I always try to end with hope. So that's what I like aim for whenever I'm writing a short story or a novel. So I want to end with hope.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for answering that question. We're going to move on to a question from, well, Diana. And this is for the authors who didn't already get a chance to kind of answer a question along these lines. It's just, what was the first horror story that really left an impact on you and what its impact was? So we did ask a couple of people this question. And what I'm actually going to do is thank you, Diana, for asking this question. What would your answer to it be?
So this is a kind of a tough one because horror's just been part of my life for as long as I can remember. My parents let me watch a lot of things a lot younger than they probably should have. Um, but I think it was probably going back to, a lot of fairy tales specifically are really horror in their original incarnation. And I think it was really telling that I was gonna become a horror writer when my favorite fairy tale was Bluebeard. I had this really gorgeous illustrated set book of fairy tales that some of them were a little watered down from the original, but most of them were at least like very close to the original versions of the fairy tales. And Bluebeard struck me not just for the fascinating story of this woman who's realizing that she can't, trust her husband and that there's this horror behind everything that he does. Uh, but because it also just it had the prettiest illustrations in that book. It was I wish I still had it because it was just an absolutely stunning fairy tale collection, and the illustrations for Bluebeard were off the charts beautiful.
Thank you. So the next author I'm going to ask this question to is Elise.
Okay. This is we're asking now, what was the first horror? That's right. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. So I'm gonna lean into Mia's brilliant analysis of how there's horror and all these things we don't categorize as horror. And also lean into Diana's insight about being shown things that were absolutely not age appropriate. I was born at the very end of the 70s. And so when I was 4 years old, a movie called The Dark Crystal came out. And the experience as a 4-year-old, like toddling up to the TV and having my hands on it while these very innocent creatures are having their life force drained out of them by this magical crystal to feed these voracious, like creepy old monster guys that want to live forever, is a image that has never left me, and like it resonates through all of the sort of modern writing about the patriarchy and so forth. So like it was a very archetypal early, I imprinted on that, and I know it's not technically horror, but yeah, it 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 horrified me, and I'm still to this day like ugh.
I think there has to be just a really interesting correlation between kind of your early influences and the kind of genre you're interested in. For example, my spouse, his parents would read him Edgar Allan Poe as a child, and now his favorite genre is just that dark horror sort of thing. So it's interesting to hear these kinds of stories. So the next person I'm going to ask the question, what was sort of that first horror story that had an impact on you, is Sam, please.
Yeah, in hearing everyone else's stories, I'm realizing I've never had an original experience in my life. Because mine matches Diana's and Elisa's so well. So when I was a wee babe at 4 years old, I remember my parents let me watch Jaws, and I lived by the beach at that time. And so, as you can imagine, forevermore, I didn't go back into the water. I said, I'm going to die, and it's going to be a shark attack. And so now I have a healthy respect for sharks. I think they are sweet little animals and they don't purposefully want to murder me. But I had nightmares about like sharks for years. And I maybe sometimes still have nightmares about sharks, to be honest with you. And so I feel like that the idea like of, I never actually saw a shark in the water, but the fact that it could be there and I never knew it could happen to me. I feel like that I draw on that in my own writing now of like the sense of, well, is it there? Is it like Schrodinger's shark at this point?
Excellent, thank you. So the next person I'm going to ask is Soyam. What was that
Um,
first experience with horror that had an impact on you?
So I was probably 7, and I read a version of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which had illustration. So that scared the shit out of me, and I didn't sleep for like I think 4 or 5 nights. I would always feel like if I opened door, there would be Dracula standing behind the door. So I was really really scared, but also I was like deeply fascinated. I was like, oh, I need to read more stories like this. I was like, okay, if I get what if I get scared? I was like, okay, this is scary, but I love it. So that was kind of my first introduction to horror. And like, yeah, I read Edgar Allan Poe also very young, and I was like, why is this so morbid and like so dark? But I was hooked. So even though I felt like it was very dark, so still I was hooked. So that was my introduction to horror.
Amazing, thank you. So I'm going to move on from this question to go to one I saw in the chat. I'm just going to take a second to find it that I thought I think it's a really interesting and I'd say important question to ask. And this is again going to be posed to all the authors in alphabetical order. um, it's just the idea that kind of discussing stories about marginalized communities or from marginalized perspectives, working with that genre of horror and seeing representation of marginalization in horror. Just kind of what are your thoughts on that? How have you seen that as a trend? What kind of feelings you have around that idea? So the first person, because again, alphabetical order, I'm going to ask this question to is A.H. Davison.
This is a really great question. I think that representation for marginalized authors in horror is really important because it gives us a space to share what our fears and horror in our daily reality are to people who don't necessarily experience that or are aware of it. So it really is getting to work through some of that trauma and those experiences while also um, getting to share that and educating people on what our lives are like a little bit. And I think it's really important for our stories to be told by us. I think there is a space for non-marginalized people to put themselves in our shoes and to try to tell those stories and try to imagine what that might be like. I appreciate that as well, but I think that it's really important for us to be at the forefront of sharing what our experiences and our fears are in our daily lives.
Thank you. The next person I'm going to pose this question to is Diana.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of what A.H. Davison said, and I think there's also just, as well as, being able to express this for other people and have other people connect with it, either because it resonates with them or because they're starting to see what it is like for marginalized people. There's such a powerful catharsis in writing horror, even the like saddest, most tragic horror, there is a really deep catharsis in writing it. You unleash so many of the fears that we as marginalized people carry with us, the sorrows that we carry with us every day. And while writing is not therapy, it is definitely therapeutic, and I find that most true for horror. I find it true for all writing, but especially for horror, and we need that space to let these things out because we don't get that space in our day-to-day lives as a general rule. And quite frankly, a lot of us can't afford therapy or we're on a 5-year waiting list. So yeah, this is what we've got. This is the space that we've got, and um, that's so important to have that creative release for all of those things.
Thank you. The next person I'm going to pose this question to is Elise.
Having trouble finding my unmute button, sorry. So I initially, when I was thinking about a response to this question, I was thinking along the lines of what AH said, which is like the helping people who don't experience the sort of daily fear of being having a marginalized identity that's like being vilified in society, giving that empathy, creating that empathy or that space where people can move into a place of empathy. I'm also visibly physically disabled, so I have that piece too. And for me, like every time I read a story or create a story that invites someone who may not have that lived experience to see what it feels like, I always feel like what we're doing is sort of like inviting. Writing has this magical way of taking something that's very individual and making it universal. And that's like one of the sort of secret superpowers of magic, because of writing, because I think we can invite people to shift their relationship with reality as they step into the universal elements of individual experiences. And so so as AH was saying, inviting people into the experiences that we have uniquely had as marginalized people, it's like this. It's creating a safe space for other people to welcome that empathy into themselves and to find the ways that we are all connected are stronger than the ways that we are all different.
Thank you. I did actually, I quite liked the little slip of magic, because I think that it kind of just speaks to what I think a lot of people who write and who read feel kind of stories are. But anyway, I thought that was meaningful. Thank you. So the next person that I would like to ask this question to is Mia.
Well, I feel like everybody's already said pretty much all there was to say. But I would say I don't deliberately use a specific perspective, gender, orientation, race, anything like that in my work, unless it suits the story. I don't necessarily set out to make my work didactic, at least not by design. But I certainly hope that as I pick diverse protagonists and embody them with as much agency and personality and charisma and everything else you hope to put in a character as I can, it will hopefully speak to people or resonate with people in a way that will make them open their hearts and minds a little bit more. I think that's so important in this day and age, to just try to listen to people who are not like you. And I think that's really all anybody can ask for. And just a little kindness, a little understanding, and without sounding like it's a message, it should just be there because it's human. It should be there because that's how people should live. And I think books are some of the best things about us as people, our stories. And if they bring that to the world, if they help people feel a little less alone, then I'm happy.
Amazing. Thank you. The next person I shall pose this question to is Sam.
This question makes me think about, I feel like horror has a long tradition of being created on the backs of marginalized people. Like it makes me think of like the last girl trope, for example. And like it's very like female-centered like experience, but not being told by, marginalized groups. And so I appreciate that the growing diversity in the horror genre and the growing hunger for more diverse stories allows marginalized people to tell their own story and not let other people tell their story for them. So, and plus, it's like so much scarier than, than what someone else could imagine might be our perspective.
Thank you. So the next person I will pose the same question to is Soyam.
I completely agree with the points people have made. I'm okay with people writing from a marginalized community perspective, but I feel like it's also very risky because it's going to take away a lot of things which they may not have like the perspective of. So, like if we let the writers from the marginalized community to like take precedence about writing these stories and making sure they are also being heard, then it's completely fine. But I think it's scary because as much as progress we have made uh, in kind of trying to have more diversity and all, uh, this could just go away like in a very, very short period of time. So as much like it's okay to write from a marginalized community's perspective, it's also important to protect the voices.
And thank you. I wanted to thank you all for sharing your perspectives on that question. I think it is, well, and to the author who asked that question, because I think it is a very important kind of topic. And it's important to get perspectives on sort of marginalized experiences from marginalized people. So thank you all. The final question that I want to pose to everyone, seeing as we have a little bit of time left, is just if you haven't had the chance to answer this one yet, what are you working on? What is sort of your next project coming out? And I don't think anyone's had a chance to answer the second part yet, which is where can people find you if they want to know more about the things that you have been working on? So, what I am going to do is, again, I am going to go in alphabetical order here. So, I'm going to start with A.H. Davison. So, what have you been working on and where can people find you?
So I'm currently revising my hopefully debut novel. It's called Exodus, The Hope Project. It's a science fiction novel that considers if it's always best to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, or are there perhaps some secrets worth keeping for the sake of humanity's survival? I'm very excited about it. It's been in the works for about 10 years. That is the novel that has taught me how to write novels, how to edit novels, how to revise novels, and I will hopefully have it ready for other people's eyes soon, and we'll be querying hopefully sometime after that. I have short stories that I am trying to get published, nothing coming out immediately, but if you do want to follow my progress, you can find me at AH Davison at Blue Sky or at ahdavison.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the next person I will ask this question to is Diana.
Yeah, so I talked a bit about getting back into fantasy, but that's not going to be out for a while because I mean like I'm working on the outline and I started yesterday revisiting an outline. It's an old project I'm picking back up. But yesterday, 2 days ago, I also sent off for edits a tragic vampire cult story. It's called Woman of Sorrow and Blood, and that is in copy edits like right now. So I am hoping to release that in the spring. I'm very excited about it. It is by far the best thing that I've ever written, and I am really proud of it, and I'm looking forward to breaking a lot of hearts with it. And you can find me at authordianagunn.com or at Diana L. Gunn on Blue Sky. And just remember that both Diana and Gunn have two N's in them.
Awesome, thank you. The next person I will pose this question to, so what are you working on? Where can we find you? Is Elise.
Hi there. Okay, so I am working mostly on I'm always working on multiple things at once, but mostly I'm working on I have my debut novel coming out from Crooked Lane Books. It's coming out May 26th. And it is exactly the opposite of this. It's a cozy murder mystery about a human magician who rescues 3 kittens, and they have the ability to subtly bend the laws of physics. Most of the story is told from their points of view, and their human gets accused of murder. So they have to figure out how to solve the crime so that she doesn't get hauled off to the human pound forever, leaving them homeless. So it's lighthearted and cute and fun. One of the 3 POV characters is non-binary, so it has a little bit of own voices representation in there. But I wrote it to as a way to heal myself from some things I had been through. So it's very like it's like a cup of hot cocoa in book form. And so I'm working on book 2 of that series right now, which I'm hoping will be a Halloween book. And then of course, I have other irons in the fire, much darker irons in the fire. But you can find me. I have a website. It's Elise, ELISE Scott, SCOTT.com. I'm also on Blue Sky as Elise Scott. And I'm on the site formerly known as Twitter, and I'm on Instagram, although I'm terrible at it. So you can find me in a lot of places. I have a newsletter where you can get life advice from my silly kittens. If anybody wants that, that's fun times. So you can find that on my website too.
Amazing, thank you. So the next person I am going to ask this question to is Mia, please.
I'm not gonna try to spell out my website, but if somebody types in Mia Dahlia author, it will be the first thing that comes up. I usually brand everything under Dahliaverse because I not so humbly try to build a universe of stories. So you can find me under Mia Dahliaverse on Facebook and under just at Dahliaverse on Instagram or X. And if you're on my website, kindly sign up for a newsletter so I don't feel like I'm shouting into vacuum. And it's once a month and brief and entertaining. But what I'm working on next, well, as a horror writer, fall is a very busy time. So I have a lot of anthologies featuring my short stories coming out that I'm thrilled about, and it just kind of all stockpiled, and now it's several anthologies every month. I've just been outside of horror, I've just been featured in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, which was one of my dream markets, so I'm very proud of it, and that's a mystery story, noir. The rest are horror. There's a Halloween anthology, Semaine Screams from Black Beacon Press Publishing. I will be making both my Australian and New Zealand debut, which is I'm very excited about because I try to be published as internationally as I can. This month too, I have a novella in an anthology collection of novellas coming out from Lethe Press that comes out, I think, this month. And anybody who liked This Broken World will love that novella because it was written roughly around the same time and in roughly the same mood. So that's pretty exciting. It's all sapphic witches. So it's a fun collection. My third novel is coming out hopefully next February. It's called Beautiful Ones. It's a mashup of horror thriller with sci-fi elements. It has, because I don't like to do anything simple, I wanted to rewrite zombie genre. So that's hopefully what I've done. Is coming out from Crystal Lake Publishing. And I just signed with a new agent, and I'm very excited. Hopefully something will come of that. So shout out to John Gerald. And yeah, please connect on social media. I love that sort of thing. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. So then I will go with this question to Sam, please.
Yeah, so I already had the opportunity to spill my guts about my next project with a dark dramatic fairy tale. Side note on that, I have been studying German for like 6 months and I'm not very good at it, but it's been very useful. Um, so instead of talking about that, where you can find me is I have a website, samrosewild.com, and it will kind of like lead you to the different place that I am at the internet. I have a blue sky and an Instagram, and those are sam.rosewild. I also just launched a newsletter, which is terrifying and also exciting. So, also please do me the favor if you can of following my newsletter. So, like me, I'm not shouting into the void. Yeah, that's kind of where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you. And then last but not least, let's go with Soyan, please.
So I'm currently finishing up a novel. It's a climate fiction fantasy novel. So the premise is like it's set 200 years, 210, 50 years from now. The after a like a devastating climate like a event, the world is now reduced to like few like islands, and like they have like decided, okay, we this was caused by capitalism and like consumerism, so we are technology and religion, so we are going to get rid of all those things. So in this world, my main protagonist is a woman who is very ambitious, and she wants to rule one of these islands, whose current ruler is her dad, and her dad says, no, you can't rule it because you are a woman. And then that kind of pisses her off, and she goes back to plotting her return by any means. She also kind of dabbles into the world of tantra, which is how to bend minds and control people and make them what they want, like what you want them to do. So, and she also colludes with anarchists and all, and like it kind of results in a chaos. And then she learns how she can be the leader her people will need her to be. So that's the novel I'm working on, and I'll start querying in January. And then I already have finished a lot of science fiction short stories and trying to submit them, get them published. That's all I'm working on.
And where can people find you if they want
Oh
some
yeah,
updates?
sorry. So people can find me on Blue Sky. My handle is @Swayam my full name, author at Blue Sky.
Amazing. Thank you. So that does conclude our questions. And so before I let everyone go for today, I want to share some information. One, if you would like to get your hands on a copy of Choices and you have not already, there are a bunch of different options. You can get either an ebook or a paperback from Indigo, Amazon, Renaissance's website. But the way I recommend getting a copy is by going to your local bookshop, your local independent bookshop, seeing if they have one in stock. And if they don't, they can order it. Essentially, you can get this book wherever books are sold, but I recommend getting it from your local independent bookshop. Speaking of which, some of the people involved with Choices are going to be at an in-person event November 2nd at 1 at a local independent bookshop called Little Ghost Books. If you want more information about this event, you can find that on Renaissance Press's Facebook page. I think it is going to be pretty fun little event where you can, again, get your hands on a copy of the book. You can also meet some of the people involved with choices and also get your hands on a copy of the book by attending CanCon, specifically Saturday, October 17th around 11:30. So those are some great options for getting a book in person, meeting some authors. It's again, CanCon specifically is always a good time, and Little Ghost Books has been a very much a pleasure to correspond with and work with. So I do encourage you all to check those things out if you're either in Ottawa for CanCon or Toronto for Little Ghost Books. With that being said, I do have some thank yous that I wanted to share myself. I wanted to say thank you to Diana. I wanted to say thank you to the authors and really just everyone who came here, because an event wouldn't have been successful if it was just me asking questions and then minutes of silence. So thank you for you all for being here. I also want to say thank you to Samira Aiden, who was our summer intern, who really helped with the organization of this event, who helped with the script and the questions and that sort of thing. So one last thank you is to everyone who has listened to us today. I do appreciate your comments, your questions, all those sorts of things. And I hope that we see you at some point in the future at either CanCon, Little Ghost Books, or just anywhere books are sold. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us.